Great. We're live. Hi, guys. This is our first segment of Advice Corner, specifically for all the advices we always often get asked by ex-Muslims from various parts of the world. On our first segment, we're going to talk about ex-Muslims in Muslim majority countries, and with me is my co-host Ghada. Ghada,
Hello.
please introduce yourself and give us a little more like of a background from like your
All right.
journey and where you're from.
All right. So my name is Ghada. I'm originally from Saudi. I grew up, born, raised, everything there. I was born to a very, very religious family. So religious that the indoctrination started. I would say since I can talk. The first thing that I was taught is to say those questions that to answer the questions that you would have been asked in the grave. So, like, who's your God? Who is your prophet? What is your religion? And I would be asked that every night before I go to sleep. And that's just like a little snippet of like how indoctrinated I was. And it just continued on like that until I finally was able to start questioning things a little bit more when I started reading at around high school time. And that's when I started becoming more, I guess, questioning and doubting the religion, especially that I see that when it comes to the way it treats women, it treats them kind of like they're nothing more than objects. And then there's like drastic differences in the way men and women are treated in the religion. And that didn't sit well with me. And then when I finally went to college, I was in the United States and I was exposed to all sorts of different religions and all the sorts of different people. Before that, and I saw that like when you were talking to Zahra in her in their interview, like for me, it was the same thing. Islam was the only thing I knew. It was the only thing that was around me. It was the whole country, the whole Saudi Arabia was Muslim. Everywhere I go was just Islam. So when I finally came to the US and I was surrounded by people of all different religions and backgrounds and walks of life, and I'm like, all those people are going to go to hell and only I'm going to heaven? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And it just, the whole hijab thing. And I remember for a long time, I never really felt that spirituality with God. And I would always think that there was something wrong with me. Like, I can see my parents and my family and my friends and people all around me. Like, they feel this connection to God or a spiritual connection, and I never felt that, and I always thought that there has to be something wrong with me. So when I finally started thinking about it critically, I started thinking like, yeah, I don't even believe in any of this. The only reason I do this is because I'm afraid of my mom. So I remember the day very, very, very clearly. I was a little hungover. I woke up and I was like, okay, great. Now I have to pray Fajr because I forgot to pray it because I was hot because I was drunk. And then I stood in front of my prayer mat, and then just as I was about to do, the niyyah, so you can start praying, I'm like, wait a second, I don't even believe in this shit. Why am I doing it? So I stopped.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
ever since then, I've been an ex-Muslim. I had to live with my family for a while as an ex-Muslim, which is why this topic is very, very dear to me because I know exactly how a lot of you feel out there that are still living either with their families or still living in Muslim majority countries, or they can't express who they are and they can't be who they are. They have to continue to pretend because that's how I was. I lived a double life. And then December 30, 2014. I hopped on a plane and I got here to the United States and I never looked back.
Right. So I guess just relevant to this topic is basically living in the Middle East as an ex-Muslim, having
Yes.
Islam all around you and having, I guess, no outside world or, no freedom of speech, not, let alone freedom of thought as well, because
No.
everything suffocates you and it's all around you. And
Hmm.
I know so many ex-Muslims can relate to that. I was something like that, but I became an ex-Muslim living in the West as well. Like I had that freedom, I have a connection with my family, and I could still be open with them about my apostasy. Maybe not drink and stuff, but in terms of like not wanting to pray, not believing, I've had that. So I guess what are some of the typical questions we get from a lot of ex-Muslims are, how do you come out to your parents when you live in the Middle East?
Oh God, no. At least not in my situation. It really is dependent on your family, where you live. I guess how religious your parents are, and whether or not you think your parents are going to tell anybody. Because in the Middle East, even if let's say your family's okay with it, and you go and tell somebody, you go and tell your parents, for example, like, "Hey, I don't believe in this," and they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, I understand." But then they go and tell other people. Like I've known stories of this, at least one person, just as an example, where his family, his mom knows that he's an atheist. He told her, and then she went and told his grandparents. But then his grandparents went and told everybody else. Like that's the good thing is he was living in Jordan, and Jordan does not have a punishment for apostasy in
Hmm.
the manner like other countries.
Hmm.
So they're not beheaded or anything like that. But still, it does make it difficult for you
Yeah.
to just have friendships and live there. So
Yeah.
my idea, so to be honest, like in my opinion, don't tell your family. If you are going to come out to somebody, come out to people that you are comfortable with, especially if it's a friend of yours or somebody that is more liberal.
Yeah. I think age is also a good denominator, especially and we're going to cover this in our next series in terms of like age and financial independency. But just in realms of living in Muslim majority countries, the accessibility of books can
Hmm.
sometimes be restricted. Did you
Yes.
feel that Saudi Arabia had that? And um, if somebody had caught somebody reading a book, let's say on their phone or their tablet, what would the precautions be? Is there like an excuse they can come up with?
I mean, there are excuses that they can come up with. Like, for example, if you're reading a like a Richard Dawkins book, say that,
Mhm,
hey, he's a biologist. I'm reading about biology, or
mhm,
say that you want to see what the other side is thinking because you want, I don't know, it's God always says, like in the Quran, to think and read and whatever. You
mhm,
can always make an excuse as to why you're reading this. The thing is about, at least in Saudi Arabia, I don't know how it is in other countries. I mean, the books were not available. You can only find them online, and pirating is unfortunately a very great pastime over there. But for me, whenever I used to buy books, I used to buy them here in the U.S. and then I would just take them with me.
yeah. And did
A
you
lot of
ever get caught?
and for no, the thing is, like, I think Saudi cares more about Shia books than they do about atheist books.
Okay. Wow.
They, at least in Saudi, I don't know how it is in other countries. Like
Hmm.
for me, at least, the biggest thing that they used to that they used to crack down on were Shia books, not atheist books. Atheist books now, especially that Saudi has become a little bit more open.
Hmm.
And the religious police aren't as strong, so it's not as censored as it used to be. So it's not going to be like these mutawas going over and just like taking all the books and throwing them.
Yeah.
But still, if you are from a religious family or a more conservative background, like in a very, certain communities in Saudi and in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, whatever, um, I don't suggest you advertise that you're reading these unless, of
Yeah.
course, you're reading them with people that are like minded.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to my mind is also kind of coming from an Islamic point of view and go like, oh, I want to refute this book because
Exactly.
obviously people are talking about it. So, you want to be more Muslim in that case in terms of like defending, um, I get reading that book.
Yes.
Um, the other question I had, and I feel like we'll be covering this in future topics as well. What happens if you don't pray or people notice that you're ex-Muslim in a way, like, your behaviors, you disagreeing with specific like values that come with Islam, for instance, like women covering up, and this could be a man that disagrees or a woman that disagrees.
Hmm.
I guess what happens or what would you say to people in terms of like how to counter it when your family has a hint of it or if they find out? Do
My
you
my suggestion is to always frame it in like, I know this is going to sound horrible, but and unfortunately, when you live in a Muslim majority country, you have to lie and live a double life. Otherwise, it's going to be either dangerous for like your life, your freedoms, what you can do. It just limits your choices if you don't as if
Yeah.
you don't essentially lie and pretend to be somebody you're not. So in my opinion, at least, like if let's say your family finds out that you're not praying, and or you have questions about these things, always frame them in a way that it's just something that I'm struggling with. It's really really hard for me to stay on schedule. I'm really trying. Like, make it look like you actually are trying, even though you really aren't. That's what I tried to do. For girls, it's always great to just use your period. I've used my period so much. I've had 10 days of period every Ramadan.
Yeah, I would also say like like I think it's 1 out of every 5 women have PCOS and irregular
Mhm.
periods.
Yes,
And
I'm one of them.
yeah, me too. But like in the Shia books, they had specific guidelines on like what
Ah,
happens if you cross
yes.
a few days.
It's
I
10.
mean,
I
yeah,
don't know why that's the magic number, but 10 is the magic number. And then afterwards, you have to do ghusl every time you go to pray.
yeah.
And yeah, they made me do it.
Yeah, I mean with my family it was mostly like, yeah, do it, or there's like this pressure from your sisters especially to do it. And sometimes I'm like, nah, can't be bothered. Yeah, God
Yeah.
will know. Um, the one excuse I also like saying is I actually use an Uno reverse card on my parents, and I'm like, did Islam say that there's no compulsion in religion? So I should be able to follow it my way, and my relationship with God is my business. And sometimes that worked, and sometimes it didn't.
Yeah.
And
You
sometimes
see,
that can work if you go like, hey, didn't Islam say this? And I'm like, I'm trying, and like what you say, like I'm trying as well.
yes.
Um,
Yes. And another thing is that always mention, at least in my case, the way I got away with, well, I didn't really get away with it because I still ended up being forced to wear hijab again. But when they found out I didn't wear hijab, I made it sound like, it's a struggle because, I wanted it to be from me. I didn't want it to be like, forced into it. I want it to be something that I mean, I was already an ex-Muslim by then, but whatever. I was telling them that it's, just trying to phrase it, trying to frame it in a way that you're trying to do it for the good of the religion, to better yourself, essentially. Like, I know it sounds to them, it'll always sound like you're sinning, but it'll sound less of a sin if you tell them you're trying to make it better.
yeah. Yeah, I used to. I think one thing I've learned is as we increase and as we grow as ex-Muslims and other younger ex-Muslims find us who are obviously around the age of like, 13 as well. We've had 12 and 13-year-olds who are just like, I don't like this, and that's fine. But then they're often patronized by their families.
Yeah.
Um,
If you live in a Muslim majority country and you're still highly dependent on your family because of your age, um, it's unfortunately it's the same whether you're here in the West or in the Middle East, because you're always going to be dependent financially on your parents if you are not financially independent, especially if you're younger than 18 and you don't have a method of earning money. So if you're still under the wings of your parents, try your best not to. I mean, I know it's really really difficult, especially as a teenager, but like my dad used to say, just be a hypocrite.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I never had them when I was young. Like at 14, they kind of forced me to pray, but then I'm like, nah, don't feel like it. You can't force me.
Oh, I was
Sometimes I'll,
7 years old.
oh, so like no, like ever since a young age they would, but it was at 14 when I'm like, I don't want to pray. I
Hmm.
always had to be, but at 14 was when I could actually stand my ground a little. But I guess back to just like focusing what else we can cover being in a Muslim majority country is
Loneliness.
yeah,
The biggest
support.
thing, honestly, um, is the loneliness, and that's the thing that I felt the most, especially when I was questioning, when I was in high school, and then when I was in college, when I was also questioning and leaving. Because I mean, I lived in the West, I was in college and everything, but everybody around me was Muslim still, or not ex-Muslim, essentially. Um, so the loneliness that you feel when you get back, you're thinking that you're the only one. And I really thought that. Like, I was in Saudi Arabia and I thought no one else was ex-Muslim. That it was just me. And even though I uh, found some friends, and essentially, there are ways that you could potentially vet people to see. whether or not they will take it is just to just get to know the person, throw a few things. Like, at least when I was in Saudi and I was trying to figure out whether this one guy that I liked was ex-Muslim or not, or at least open-minded or skeptic, is the is that I just kept asking him questions, just like heard very carefully how he responded to prayer or to fasting, to jinn stories or anything stupid like that. I mean, he was a little susceptible to jinn stories, mainly because we're Arab.
Yeah.
It just like it's part of our culture. But I remember I heard him say that when he was in college, he didn't pray and he didn't fast, and I'm like, okay. And then I started noticing more and more, like, this guy doesn't pray either. Okay, he might be, he might be. And then one day he told me, when we were the only two people in his room, no one else around us, he whispered, I'm an atheist. Like, he was scared even then.
Yeah.
But
I can
that's,
imagine a lot of people think like that. They're like, should I tell them? Am I going to get in trouble? How are you going to
yes.
find it? I
But
think,
it's, but the
yeah.
feeling is like when he said that, I'm like, yes. And I'm like, so am I. And then he's like, no way. Like, I can't tell anybody. And then that, I remember that exchange, and it was the first atheist Saudi that I met, first ex-Muslims I met, and the way we were talking to each other, it was like the most exciting things. Like, oh, yeah, like, I can't tell anybody. Like, I can't tell anybody either. Like, people here, if you tell them that, like, they look at you differently, and then they may tell other people, and then you have to change your mind. Like, no, I'm not an atheist. I was making a joke, and it's pretty. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's just vetting people, essentially, trying to figure out whether or not they're going to be okay with it. And you don't have to tell them, like, come out to them. You can show them who you are, slowly, slowly, slowly. And if you think after conversations with them that you could trust them and come out to them, then do it.
Yeah. I mean, what happens if it's clickbait? What if they're lying just to get people out?
Oh, you would definitely know. These people are not very subtle, especially in Muslim majority countries. They are not subtle.
Yeah.
They will not come over to you and be like, oh yeah, the Quran, what a bullshit book. No, they won't say
Yeah.
that. That
Yeah.
you can tell.
Yeah, I think you can tell because especially the way we're raised, if you criticize anything, there's disagreements. But when you start criticizing the word of God, especially the Quran,
That's
people
when
get
you
very
know.
defensive.
Hmm.
And what happens if that person goes back to being a Muslim? Because it has happened sometimes. It could be a lot of different things, and it could be cognitive dissonance or basically sometimes the fear of hell, which I think we'll cover later on as a topic. But what happens if they turn back Muslim and you're in a Muslim majority country and they tell you about it and they threaten you later when you disagree?
So you went back to Islam.
The person goes back to Islam, their friend
Yes.
that you've told
Okay.
about, and you're in
Oh,
a
the
Muslim majority.
friend.
Yeah,
Phew, that I gosh, I wouldn't. I don't know. I guess the only thing you can do is deny it, deny it, deny it. That's the only. That's what I did. I just
yeah.
denied, 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 denied.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's again, pretending is the majority of this segment anyway. So I guess
Hmm.
I would also pretend to go like, oh,
Unfortunately,
what did you read? Maybe I will read as well, and maybe you
like
can
what
guide me to the right path.
you said what? Let me look at this.
Yeah,
And
buy yourself time because if they've been there and they were not lying and they've gone back, I think just pretend.
and there's another thing as well. So this, at least from my point of view, I don't know how it is for other people, but I've had friends that were well, they were still Muslim, but they were not very religious, and they knew that I was an atheist,
Yeah,
and they knew that the guy that I was seeing at the time was also an atheist, and they knew other people in our group that were not very religious, and they were kind of okay with that, even though they were a little bit more religious than we are. And then they became super religious, like to the point where like he wanted to go to the masjid and pray every time. And he knew that I was an atheist, and he knew about the other people, but in his mind, because he already knew us before he found out that we were atheists, it was okay for him. There are people that are like that, and I have met them, and they were religious. Like one of my friends actually in Saudi, a very religious girl, and her husband and family. Um, she didn't care because she knew me before. She knew me since we were 18, 17. And like, just because now she found out that for some time during that time she knew me, I was an atheist, it's not going to change how she treats me because she already knew who I was and she's already my friend. So there are people, there are Muslims that will not turn against you. I mean, Muslims are not a monolith. They're not just one. They're not just one group, and then and they're all going to act the same way.
Yeah.
It's just
I guess my next question was mostly around. I feel like a lot of this we can go deeper into topics, and we will every week. But I have had an instance, and this could probably be the skeptic in me, where a lot of the girls have come up to me and they pretend to be ex-Muslim to escape countries.
oh, the
Um,
oh,
and like obviously I wouldn't like I don't need them to be ex-Muslim for me to help them, but a lot of people would then come up, and there is a lot of people who have never been Muslims want to help ex-Muslim, specifically women,
mhm.
because evidently women are likely to go through abuse in
Yes.
Muslim majority families, not countries, Muslim families.
Mhm.
But a lot of the people who have never helped other ex-Muslims or have just interacted, or like people in the audience right now, and they're like, oh, I know one girl that came out to me and she needs help. How does one from the outside navigate that? I have a few comments, but I'll let you go first.
So I'm going to preface this with saying, and a lot of other ex-Muslims agree with me, that escape is not for everybody. And I'm not saying this as a person that, and I'm not being greedy or anything like that, but really being on your own is an extremely, extremely difficult thing. It's not easy at all, no matter, even if you have support. Being trying to rebuild your life all over again from nothing is extremely difficult, especially in a foreign country. So if you do know somebody in a Muslim majority country that is being abused or wants to leave, the biggest thing that you should do is counsel them. Just talk to them, find out what they are going through. What exactly is the abuse that they're going through? Is it because of the religion? Is it because of misogyny? Because of their family? Because if it's the father that's been abusive, there are even in Saudi Arabia there are battered women and children programs that you can call, and they will come and they will help. And especially like recently, it's become a lot more prevalent in the Middle East because of what's been going on in the news and the girls escaping and some honor deaths and stuff like that. So use the resources that you have in your country, even if they're bullshit. Still use them. And the other thing about when you're speaking to these girls, if they do not have a degree, if they don't have their financial independence, they don't have money in order to start their lives all over again, suggest that to them. The biggest thing I always suggest to people is get your degree. I don't care what your degree is, get it. It really does help. If you don't have a degree and if you don't want to get a degree, have some kind of experience or skill that can get you a job later on if you go if you go like abroad or escape your family. That is the biggest thing, because you need some kind of financial independence, or you just need something, in order to start. Also remind them that they're not on their own. There are so many secular projects out there that can help. There are people, Freedom from Religion Foundation, if you need somebody to talk to. I'm always available for anybody that wants to talk to me. And Zara will, once she posts this, she'll tag me on it in Facebook. And honestly, anybody can. I don't mind talking to anybody. I would do things a little differently had I had more time, so I can struggle a little less when I came here. But I mean, struggle is going to happen anyway. But just remember that leaving is unfortunately not for everybody. And I've known girls that have escaped and had to go back, and
Yeah.
and I haven't heard from them when they went back, because you don't know what's going to happen. So it's very important not to get too emotionally involved, because it's very easy to get emotionally involved with,
Yeah.
and I have too. Like, I've spoken to many girls that are like, I really want to leave. Girl, you're 16. Please finish high school. Figure out a way to get your education somewhere, whether in your country or outside. And then when you have enough to leave, leave. And
Yeah.
if you can use your country's resources, use them.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people that we get, like some people that flag it to me, especially when they're young and have nothing to, I guess it's one of those things that, even if you move to another country, they want you to be a skilled worker. Doesn't matter if
Yes.
you're a refugee. It's just easier for you to survive if you're a skilled worker because there are people in the country who will be prioritized as compared to you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would also highly recommend that learning English as well.
100%. Yes.
So even if you go to a European speaking country, sorry, like another European language speaking country, English is so essential so you can get around because they don't necessarily have translators.
Yes.
Um,
And the
so
United Nations also uses English as the main language whenever they, I don't know if it's one of the main languages essentially. So if you become a refugee, for example, or if you go through them in order to leave the country, then that's what you would do. Another thing that I would suggest is crap. And when you were talking about the skilled, a skilled worker, is that it makes immigration a lot easier if you are a skilled worker.
yeah,
They asylum, refugee, whatever. I mean, they look at your background, your story, if you really are at risk, and that is the majority of it. When if they are going to give you you know the asylum or not, but it really, really helps if they knew that, like, you have that education, you're skilled, that you would be able to contribute. It's a capitalistic country, so that's what you have to look at it from that point of view. So having some kind of skill, even if it's absolutely anything like IT, writing, you have a degree in something, you have experience as an operator somewhere in your country, that is all very helpful.
yeah. We have about 3 minutes left before we end this, but
Mhm.
just in terms of skills, especially for women who are not allowed to go outside and study, there are plenty of online courses that you can start, and that would help.
Yes.
I feel like that can still get you a job somewhere because don't be restricted by actually having to go to university. If your parents can afford to send you overseas, do it.
One more
But if they
thing.
can't, go for it.
One more thing. A lot of universities, whether here in the United States, Canada, or anywhere in Europe, offer, or even Australia, offer online courses, online degrees, and they are essentially on par with on-campus degrees. So
Yeah,
go for it. I
yeah.
highly suggest it. There's so many universities, and the courses are a little cheaper, and they will work with you if you need money. It's just go for it.
Yeah, definitely like put like I know at young age you just want to get out, but it is not an easy world there. In fact, I think I had a more cushiony life when I was, well, dependent on my parents and I lived in Tanzania, but coming outside is actually a lot harder. You get none of those privileges that you did get, and I'm definitely not undermining the abuse. I just think we need to play smart, and even if that means pretending a little more, and I guess for many parents being in the line, as long as like you have some support of actually like a social network to stay sane, mentally sane. I guess from here we've discussed so many other topics that we will get into, mental health being one, rescuing girls in depth, like what things you should look out for. um, and Ghada, do you have any last words for us?
Yes, it's going to be very difficult. I understand. I lived, goodness gracious, I was 26 when I left. So when I left my country. So I understand that you feel like your life is just slipping away, that you're not living it, that um, that you're just wasting away. But like, I'm 31 now and I'm just starting to live. So I
Yeah,
don't care. It's like, you don't, age is just a number. It doesn't matter. Just whenever you are able to live, go ahead and do it. And I remember I saw this I think a tweet or something that was going around on Facebook or Twitter and whatever. is that stop telling people that they're too old to do something, because a lot of us have been abused and lived during our teenage years and our young years, even our early 20s, that we weren't able to live until we were finally gotten out and gotten into our 30s, because now we're independent. And that's totally fine. It took me ages to finally believe that and to accept that. And somebody else to tell me, like, hey, it's okay. You're not too old. You're just 30. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just in my 30s. This is it. This is when my life begins, because I now finally am able to do the things that I want to do.
Yeah, exactly. I am going to end this here just so we can keep it short and then discuss it in more details. Thank you, Gada. And
Thank
we're going
you.
to do this every Thursday around the same time-ish.
Mhm.
Let us know what questions we've missed in specific to this topic and what other topics we should cover. Subscribe, send it to your friends in the Middle East if they could benefit from it, and help us share this video. I will probably answer the questions as we go in our next ones. We're not here to talk about opinions or politics. We specifically want advice giving
Yes.
platforms. But on other live streams where hopefully Gada will be joining us in the Life After Islam story
Oh
series.
yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
if you want to interview for it, I can do it too. My story's
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah, I really want you. I think it'll be really good. I'm going to book you in. I'm just making a list now. So yeah. Well, thank you so much,
Yeah, of
everyone.
course,
And
anytime.
let us know how we did, because this is our first one
Yes.
of
Oh, and
many.
about the lighting, hopefully next time I'll have better lighting. I promise.
It's like 6 a.m. It's 7 a.m. where you are.
Yes. I just
Yeah.
woke up, took a shower, and sat down with my coffee.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that. Bye,
You're
guys.
very welcome.